this like that.
This meeting is being recorded.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ned Dennis, and I'm the chairperson of the International Marathon Swimming Hall of Fame. We have honoree John Kinsella with us tonight. Please say hello, John.
Hello, everybody.
I may give a reasonably long introduction because it doesn't work to do short. John won 7 majors: the 1979 English Channel race, 1978 Capri to Naples, and then 5 years of the World Professional Marathon Swimming Federation. That was the annual point total. It's we don't use words like dominate very often, but he dominated professional swimming in the 70s. That was after winning a silver medal in Mexico in the 1500 when he was coming into his teens, and a gold medal in 78. Along the way, he 72, sorry.
That's right.
Along the way, he was part of 4 world records, 400 and 1500 freestyle, and a couple of relays. My memory of you, John, was when you won the award in the United States, the Sullivan Award for the top amateur athlete. As somebody who grew up in that time in the United States, that was a really, really, really big deal. And I think you were probably in high school, which probably made it even bigger. And then finally, John is also a dual inductee for the International Swimming Hall of Fame. So, John, I got a few questions for you.
Sure.
Tell us about your early swimming days. You came out of a small, I won't even call it a town, a small village. You swam with honoree Sandra Buca at the famed Hinsdale High School, coached by honoree Don Watson. Why was this a center of swimming excellence?
Well, I think it was in an era where, you had this optimism and enthusiasm on the part of both parents and swimmers. And really, I give a lot of credit to Don. He was integral in my development and success, obviously. But, he did corny things like put up signs, that would, kind of mottos, one of which always stands out in everybody's mind, that nothing great was ever accomplished without enthusiasm, and hurt, pain, agony. We wanted to hurt first, then go into pain, and then experience agony. And so it was kind of a testing ground, if you were, as it were, but a kind of a environment where everybody wanted to do well by the team. I know I certainly did. Coming into high school, the last thing I wanted to do was let down my teammates. That was more important to me than any individual success. And I think he fostered that attitude, and it was just it was contagious. So we were very blessed to have, a coach that, got not only the physical aspects of it, but also, I would say, the spiritual and, higher aspects of competing and training, and it was also mental as well as physical. So that we were very blessed to have Don as our leader, and plus, as you mentioned, Sandy Buca, and there were a lot of other, John Murphy, who I just talked to earlier today. But there were a lot of other great athletes there, and I should mention, Hinsdale High School also had a kind of culture of athletic success, both in football, tennis, gymnastics, swimming, golf. So the whole community really had a great attitude when it came to athletic excellence and pursuit.
I have to share something with you that I've not told you before. You came to Cork in 2013 for Don Watson's induction into the International Marathon Swimming Hall of Fame. And there's a great story in Ireland about the Pope coming to visit. And the urban myth is that at some point, the Pope convinced the police driver that he wanted to drive. And the Pope then, put his foot down in the metal, and next thing you know, there's a police siren behind him, and the young constable comes up, and he looks in at the driver and goes, we have a real problem, and calls to the headquarters. And the very exasperated head of the guard says, what can possibly be the problem? He goes, it's not the driver. He goes, I the guy in the back must be so important because the Pope is driving him. So when you came to Cork, people were really excited. Probably you were the finest swimmer ever to be in Ireland. And I was going, no, 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 no. He's here for the coach. The people were going, whoa. It was a great moment for me.
Right.
You qualified for Mexico in 68. At 16, you won silver medal. Tell us about coming home. Did your life change? Did cars stop in the street? What was it like?
Yeah, it was, I had gone, Don Watson again had the foresight, not knowing whether I was going to make the team or not, to send me out to train at the Air Force Academy, which was at, the same altitude as Mexico City. And so I trained out there with another Hinsdale swimmer who was actually a cadet there. And it was just the two of us training all summer. And so when I came down to Long Beach to sea level, made the team, then the team went back up for another 6 weeks. So by the time the Olympics came around, I'd been gone from home for about 5 months, and I was just, like you say, a 16-year-old. So I was getting pretty, homesick, and then I actually got Montezuma's revenge, so I got sick. So I was lucky enough, I don't know if this is your question, but I was lucky enough to have George Haynes as the head men's coach at that time. And I was just this close to giving up, and he came up to me right before the finals, and he took me by the arm and he looked me in the eyes with those steely blue eyes of his, and he said, "You've worked hard for this. Now don't, now make it count." And like that, all the worry and the, all the self-pity party, just evaporated. And I knew I was swimming for the silver medal behind, Mike Burton. But when I got home, so I've been gone a long time and whatnot. And when I came home, what I was kind of thrown by was everybody thought that I was different, or something special or whatever, but I was just the same old kid, right? I just had been gone for a while training and competing. So I was looking at myself and saying, gee, what's changed? And they were all treating me different. And so it was a little bit discombobulating for me, because I felt like I was just a friend and a kid and a whatever. But so it was a little bit intimidating in that regard. But fortunately I had swimming, and that kind of kept my nose to the grindstone. I didn't have too much time to get in any trouble with workouts and with the amount of training we were doing. So it worked out well, but it was just strange to have everybody treat you different when you just looked at yourself as, being the same.
You then went off to Indiana University, coached by Doc Councilman, who's also an honoree of the Marathon Swimming Hall of Fame. And you shared a pool with a guy named Mark Spitz. Tell us a difference between the coaches and, the first day you got in the water with Indiana. Did you go, okay, this is a different world now?
Well, yeah, I'd had the good fortune of, again, going back to Don Watson, not to beat a dead horse, but he had sent another swimmer at Hinsdale, myself, off to Santa Clara at the, tender age of 14. And we trained with Spitz and Don Scholander and Greg Buckingham and Claudia Kolb and Lynn Vidali, and they were the dominant team in the day. So I had kind of rubbed shoulders and rubbed elbows with some of the great swimmers of the era at the age of 14, and then of course on the 68 team. So when we got to Indiana, Mark was really I knew him pretty well from Santa Clara and from Mexico City, and we had we had 9 of the 12 individual world records going into my freshman year at IU, between 4 swimmers, including Gary Hall and Mike Stamp. And so I think the biggest difference that I noticed was Doc felt that doing weights would make me muscle bound, and so I'd been doing about 1,500 pulley weights, I don't know, 3 or 4 times a week under training on Watson. So when I got there, it was almost like I was in a taper, and there were, I mean, I remember one time specifically at the end of a set of 500s, I broke the NC2A record in the 500 at the end of a set. So we were doing some, incredible workouts, at least for those days, and it was very exhilarating because we were part of, it was a team thing because we had a lot of we had great swimmers, not just Olympians, but great swimmers in nationals and et cetera, et cetera. So it was a lot of fun, and but I would say Doc had a little different philosophy than Don, and I was used to more weights with Don and less with Doc, and I think that I felt like I was in a taper actually.
Tell us about your absolute favorite memory, and I'll ask you to pick one. The silver medal in Mexico, world records, Olympic gold in Munich. Pick one.
Well, just for the age and the experience, as I was mentioning before, being away from home and, kind of a lonely and sick and whatnot, I would have to say, Mexico City and the silver medal. But if I'm really being truthful, my greatest honor was I was swimming at the Y once when about 15, 20 years ago. So I was no spring chicken. And there was a class there of kids, teenage type kids that were, what's the correct term these days? I don't even know. They were a bit handicapped mentally. So anyway, I get out of the pool. This young teenage girl walks up to me and she goes, "You are a really good swimmer, a really good swimmer." And I thought, that is the most heartfelt, genuine, honor I've ever gotten in my life. I mean, so I, it's great to swim in the Olympics and all that, but really when it comes down to it, it's that, human connection. So I had to tell that, but the competing in the Olympics as a 16-year-old was, a little bit surreal and at the time and looking back on it. And I was really blessed to be able to have that opportunity and get a chance to do it at such a young age.
Tell us how you got into the marathon professional circuit.
Sure. Well, we were at, Doc Councilman's son, Jimmy Councilman, passed away when I was at IU, and we were at his wake, sadly, but one of the guys there, I believe his name was Bill Barton, was telling stories about this crazy sport that he did in Canada of marathon swimming. And he was, there's characters and, you know the drill as well or better than I do. So anyway, there were a lot of entertaining stories, needless to say. So I go, well, gee, if he can do that, I can do that type of thing. So that was just before my senior year started. Well, at the end of senior year, we go, well, let's look into this a little bit. And so we found out about meaning Sandy Buke and I, found out about the Le 24 de la Tuque, the 24 hours of La Tuque. So we sent in our form or whatever, and they promptly rejected us. Well, Sandra Buca's father, Colonel Buca, was a man that did not take any guff whatsoever. So he contacted him. This was unbeknownst to me. I mean, I didn't have anything to do with it, but he contacted him and said, "Do you know who you're dealing with here?" Basically. Anyway, we got in, and Sandy and I won the event, and that was the start. I owe Colonel Buca a big thanks for because probably my professional marathon swimming career would have been stillborn if it hadn't been for him.
And is there a 3 o'clock in the morning story about how you were in tears and you couldn't continue and she did the extra 4 laps or anything like that you want to confess to?
Well, I was shivering at that from about 5 minutes into the end of the race. So, I was cold the whole 23 hours and 55 minutes or something. But and Sandy, is and was a rock. So she was she's a very tough lady, and so I was begging to have her do extra lengths. I think she fell for it maybe once, but I was just so cold I could barely. I was going through the hurt, pain, and agony very in a very real manner. After that, I got more cold water training and got more used to it. But that was literally my first swim, and it happened to be where I was swimming. We were swimming throughout the night. It got cold enough in the night where you could see your breath, and in retrospect, obviously with further marathons, it wasn't that cold, but it was, for me, it was very chilly. So I was feeling very sorry for myself during that race, I will say.
You won in I'll say hot water, cold water, fresh water, and salt water from 16 to 57 kilometers. You had the nickname of the American Express, which probably gave you an advantage starting off of these things. Did you have a preference of distance and temperatures and conditions?
Well, my attitude was always the longer the better. The longest race I ever swam was across Lake Ontario, which was about 32 miles roughly. So I liked endurance race. Endurance was my kind of cup of tea. So I liked that. And later on, in the first year, I got out a race that first year after Latuque. But after that, my attitude was just, if you get in, you're going to finish no matter what. And so I didn't, it was just, I had to steel myself to the realization that if you're in cold water, you're going to suffer. But what I really learned is, for me, the secret was to not fight it and just let it pass through me, and just with the attitude that, it's not gonna kill me, and I'm gonna finish regardless. So I didn't, would I have liked the race at 65 instead of 55? Yeah, sure, absolutely. Who wouldn't? But it was just a matter of if you get in the water, if you start the race, you're gonna finish it. And more professional attitude. So I didn't have now, by the same token, the 10 milers, there was one in Montreal for a couple of years, and the Chicago swims. I really enjoyed those because I felt like I could use some of my speed to advantage. So I certainly liked those, but I just felt that I had an advantage over anyone else. The longer the better.
Who were the one or two swimmers when you looked down and you said, "Oh, geez, there's going to be a battle today"? And who were your friends out there?
Well, I had my French Canadian swimmer trainer, Gilles Potvin, and he'd report to me as when I came in for something to drink or throw down the gullet, what others were doing. And there were a handful of times when he'd indicate that Sandy Buca was gaining on me. I didn't like that because I didn't want to lose to Sandy, even though I loved her and she was a great competitor. So and of course the great Claudio Plitt was the other really tough competitor. I knew in a sprint I could beat him, but he would never get his attitude was phenomenal, and my hat is off to him in terms of his longevity in his career, because he would just never give up no matter what the circumstances. So I had tough women competitors and tough men competitors. Bill Heiss was a guy who I had trained with, or I'd swum with rather, at IU. And a good friend, and he was a heck of a competitor. So through that, I'm sure you've heard this before, but you have a bond there when you're doing something that is physically challenging like that. You have a bond there, so you ultimately become good friends. But when the race starts, I wanted to win, so it wasn't a matter of they were the enemy. It was just I was gonna do my thing to my best of my ability and try to win the race.
In your English Channel race, you were in there with a bunch of people who had a lot of experience in English Channel. Plitt, Mackey, Cynthia Nichols, Renford, Reed. Did you find that a kind of a different experience, the English Channel, or did you just put your head down and say it's a race?
Well, the English Channel is a fun story because there were two acknowledged boat captains that were the best boat captains in the field. They had to have a boat for every swimmer, and so I drew one of the two. And my parents were there really for this is my last marathon competition. So my parents came over and they were in the boat with the captain, and I took off and I got a good lead over Claudio Plitt, and I was, well ahead. But after about maybe a third of the way through the race, Plitt passes me, and I can't do anything to keep up with him. I had nothing in the tank. So we get to about 5 or 6 miles off the coast of France, and I stop, and my parents said, well, the boat captain says that Plitt's going straight into shore. We're going to take a longer route, but it's with the current. And so if you can pick it up, he thinks you have a chance to catch him. At this point, I was told I was about a mile behind. I can't see, obviously. So
and they always lie to you.
Say again?
They always lie to you.
Yeah. I mean, but he said, pick it up. You may have a chance. So I'm picturing in my mind, and as you know, the English Channel, unlike other races, the finish point is anywhere on the coast beyond any water. So I'm coming in, and I'm scraping my arms on the coral because I'm picturing it's a close race, and I got to get beyond the water, and I do when I stand up, and there's no swimmers around me. Everyone's spread out, but I beat him. I beat Plitt by a half an hour. So he wasn't too happy about that the next day, and he said, I should have won. I said, well, I did, but I did have the advantage of having a really the boat captain that knew that with the spring tides, I could go, fly into the coast with the right, direction. So it was.
And who was the pilot, John?
Boy, that's a good question.
I can look it up, but I don't worry about it if it's not on top of your head. Was it Mike Oram?
Mike sounds familiar, but Oram does not.
Okay, I'll check it out.
This was 79, right? I mean, this was a while back.
Yeah. Doc Councilman broke the record as the oldest swimmer across the English Channel around about the same time you swam. Did you see him in Dover? Did he ask you for any advice? And did you ask him why it took him so long?
Well, just on that last point first, you got to remember, been with Doc for, through many cafeterias and his love for food. So I was just impressed that he was determined to take, when I heard about it, and then when I saw him later, to take on the challenge of crossing the English Channel. I did see him there. It was funny because at that point, like I said, that was my last race. We had finished up probably a month earlier in I think it was past Babyak. So I was really sloughing off in my training, if you want the honest truth. And so Doc, we got into the ocean at Dover, and I swim for about 10 minutes and get out, and he's in there for 3 hours. And I'd kind of suspended training and just said, I'm going to do the best I can. But anyway, it was amazing to me that he made it given the conditions he had and his age, and also, like I say, he hadn't trained for, I don't know, decades, and he was known for his love of food. So he wasn't the most slender fit competitor ever. So it was a heck of a accomplishment for him. And but I just it was just funny because I was the world champion, and he bested me by a great deal in our little training session, because by that point I was kind of tired of the cold water and the training, and I knew I was going on to to other things like marriage and a job and stuff like that. But he didn't. I don't recall him asking me for any advice. He was a proponent at that time of heavily lanoling up. I never did that. I just put some Vaseline under my armpits to, kind of keep the rub friction down. But he just was pretty phenomenal that he was able to. And you got to remember, when he was at his peak back in the 40s, he was a breaststroker too. He was he wasn't a distance swimmer. So it was pretty incredible accomplishment for him.
Last question I've got for you, and I'll ask you not to be modest. If in 1972 they announced that there was going to be a 10K open water marathon swim in the 76 Olympics, would you have been there, and what do you think your chances would have been?
Well, what I learned after I got out of college, in those days there was no professional swimming, and it was, in terms of pool swimming. So when you were 22, you were considered to be over the hill. Well, what I learned is a fellow high school, he was a younger guy, but he swam at Kinsella, but he came back. He went away as kind of the 98-pound weakling and came back as this really, Mr. Atlas or what have you. So we started working, heavy weights, like heavy bench press, heavy, dips, presses, curls, et cetera, et cetera. Well, what I learned is, you don't get muscle bound, you just get stronger. So by the time 76 and that, by the mid to late 70s, I realized I was stronger and better than I was when I was, 16 and 20 swimming in the Olympics. I hadn't known that when I, left amateur swimming for professional swimming, but I certainly believe that I was the best in the world at anything from, 10K to whatever K. So I would have been pretty confident of winning the gold medal if I had been able to, because, and essentially in those days also, I wasn't able to because I was considered professional. So that was the other thing.
And it's the final question. Are you still getting to pool a couple times a week? What's exercise look for you? Well,
we built a new pool here, and it's the old one was 40 feet and the new one is 45 feet. At my request, they made it 15 yards. So it's kind of sad to say, but that's a really good distance for me, rhythm wise and tempo wise. So we keep it open 6 months a year. I'm living in Michigan, and excuse me. So for 6 months, I'm swimming pretty much 5-6 times a week. The winter, well, not so much. I'm kind of ashamed to say, but I hope to get to the Y and do some indoor swimming. But in the summer, I love to. In the spring, summer, and fall, I love to swim in our pool. Right outside our door, and there's no clock and no pressure for any performance, but just very relaxing and great to stretch. I concentrate on pushing off and getting the biggest stretch I can.
I have to say, I needed to do a timed swim for 400 meters once for some lifeguarding thing. And I did it in a 15-yard or 15-meter pool. And I think I took down your world record in that thing. It was, wow. It was push, kick, stroke, flip.
Right. Well, yeah, back in the day, my current pool would not really present any challenge. But right now, it's the tempo. I just noticed the tempo is really nice. I'm doing my flip turns and stretching out, and it's just very comfortable, and you feel good afterwards. So I'm not in your shape, but when the season is on, I'm getting in there almost every day. So I feel good about that, and the next step, like I say, is hopefully to get a little indoor swimming at a local Y.
John, thank you very much for your time tonight, and we'll be in touch.
Absolutely, Ned. Take care now.